Welcome to the Scaling with Agility podcast. I'm Yuval Yeret, here to help you explore the nuances of scaling with agility and applying agility to new frontiers. And that's what we're gonna, I think, talk about today. With me is Clemens Adolphs, who's working on helping organizations look at AI the right way, leverage AI effectively. I'm gonna let Clemens introduce himself and what he's focused on. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I've been reading what Clemens has been writing about AI. He's looked at my stuff, and I see a lot of interesting connections that we were looking forward to explore. Welcome, Clemens.
Yeah, thank you so much for the kind introduction, Yuval. Really enjoying your content as well. So yeah, a very short background. I'm one of the two co-founders of Ace Labs, and we help enterprises get AI initiatives done right from end to end, and not just have everything die in the proof of concept stage and gather dust there. And no, a lot of overlap there, and like a lot of the pitfalls that happen there overlap with what agility would be about and tries to help with.
So I'm curious, what brought you to the point that you're helping organizations get AI right? What's your journey to doing this?
Yeah, so in a way, straight out of grad school, I started first as an intern and then individual contributor, customer solutions lead at a company that was doing fairly advanced research development projects and very exciting work. And there I saw that it takes a lot of work and kind of, apart from the core technical challenge, a lot of getting things right and aligned to make sure that once you hand something over to a client, that they keep using it, that they're confident that it brings them value from the point that you deliver it and then forward, and not just, oh, here's this cool demo. And so in our case, it was quantum computing, and you can use this algorithm to use this quantum computer to do stuff, but it needs to keep doing that and not just once in the demo in like, oh, we built this Jupyter notebook in Python and, nobody in the company can actually run that. So that would be a simple failure point. But so in a way, I've developed this passion of seeing things through and not just having it be a one-off.
So that's interesting. So I'm listening to you and I'm coming right off a conversation with, you might call it an initiative owner for, trying to use AI in the context of customer success. I think one of the big CRM tools that you're probably familiar with, and how can we leverage AI to answer more calls in the same hour, get to better customer satisfaction. And I connected to your comment about getting things right, as well as your history. And I'm wondering, what have you seen as the biggest risks, surprises, pitfalls in the projects or products that you've worked with? Would you say can it even work? Like what you call feasibility? Is it viable? Is the investment worth, like on an ongoing level, is the additional license we pay to the AI tools worth the time savings or revenue growth, whatever it is? Or will people actually use it? If we build it, will they come? The field of dreams question, or desirability, in other words. What have we seen? Where have things failed the most?
Probably all of the above, and then in different mixes and flavors. So I feel like, so basically with everything you ever build, there is that market risk broadly, like will anybody actually want it once you build it? And market risk doesn't necessarily need to mean, oh, you're building a consumer facing product and they have to buy it, but it could also just be an internal tool that you roll out and you want your people to use, but they don't use it. There's too much friction. They just rather copy paste from ChatGPT than like click through your 5 layers of internal whatever. So that's always there. And then through the nature of a lot of the AI initiatives and the uncertainty that is in there, the product risk is a bit or a lot higher, depending on how ambitious you aim, than it happened to be with more standard software, right? If it's like you have an idea for a new CRM because it has a different workflow that you think is better, you're like fairly certain you can build it, but will anyone want to use your workflow? Whereas if you say, oh, I want to use AI that pulls out all these amazing insights out of my CRM, or maybe you, let's say that's the fancy buzzword, build an AI native CRM so people don't even have to mess around with the entry and data entry so much. Like, can you even do it? And that requires a bit more focused experimentation. And there's some small experiments you can do, but if those don't succeed, that doesn't mean it's not feasible. It might just mean you have to work even harder to make it succeed. And so it's
I mean, I'm tempted to say AI native CRM that doesn't require the salespeople or the sales force, the service force to enter information manually. That's great. Everybody's gonna love that. But I've seen so often that even these obvious assumptions eventually fall flat. That I'm wondering, like, how often do we think things are really desirable, a field of dreams that people will really come, and we jump to the technology feasibility?
No, I
like, even for great ideas, do we want to test them? And how do you test something like this without building it in the AI world? Do you have an example of how you help somebody de-risk an AI investment recently? I mean, all AI is
nothing like very concrete comes to mind in that like market risk part. Because let's say like the last big project that already had some internal validation because they had a basic tool that did the thing and that had adoption. And so then if you're improving on something that already exists along the dimension that tool was being used, then that typically has very low market risk. It's like, oh, we're paying for this tool because it saves us 5 minutes. So then obviously they're going to pay for a tool that saves them an hour. So that's one way to de-risk is go along dimensions where it's already proven that there is demand for improvement in that dimension, and maybe where the way of engaging with the tool doesn't require complete different adoption, different ways of working. Just you do the
and I think there's an interesting opportunity there, right? Which is, and I think we even exchanged some emails about this. The way the whole AI ecosystem is evolving, if you look at vibe coding or even things that aren't vibe coding, there are so many opportunities to prototype, to create preliminary versions of things that work. They're not proving the feasibility from a technology perspective. They're not necessarily going to be production code ever, but almost like the new version of what we call the concierge MVP or the Wizard of Oz MVP, that human behind the screen, the wizard behind the screen that is making things work. The new version is ChatGPT or Claude or whatever it is with some some gum and glue and whatever. We create some prompts and things work, and we can prove some things very cheaply. And then if those things work, we can make it a more robust solution.
Yeah, very much agree that for a lot of the experimentation and like prototyping and even before that, it empowers the person with the idea, or it removes some friction. You have the idea, you just slap something together really quickly, and you don't have to go through the slog of now I have to like spec it out and like get my devs, and we have to build even a smallest throwaway prototype. So that's promising for accelerating your learning loop, if you have a learning loop to begin with, that is.
Yeah. But I think, to go back to this language that we're both using of the market, this realization that you have an internal market and you need to treat it like a market where people have options, where we're not developing systems of record. Even when we are developing systems of record, how people use them, like your CRM is a system of record. But are people really going to use this feature or that feature? Are they going to do the minimum that they have to get away with it? We need to apply a lot of the B2C product, or B2B as well, but the product management techniques, the product discovery techniques for the internal market as well. People have a choice to use the products that we're building for them internally. They also have a choice not to use these products.
Yeah, you can mandate that they use it, but you can't mandate that they embrace it. And then they'll find their workarounds and back channels, and that should tell you something. And not everybody does their best. And so if they're not using your shiny, awesome tool, maybe worth digging into that and treating it as, oh, we're getting a bad NPS and let's do some user interviews.
Or we're not seeing usage. Or let's look at our R metrics, the pirate metrics internally. Like, are people aware of our tool? Are they activating? Are they starting? Once they're activating, are they actually using it? Do they continue using it? Are they paying for it? Is an interesting one, because internally people don't typically pay for something. So that's one of the interesting ones to learn on. How do you know that people are actually willing to invest in that tool? And maybe it's enough that they invest their time as a replacement for, they're willing to pay for it. Maybe there's a new version of paying for consumption. Maybe at some point we'll see people paying for AI tokens for usage. Are they really willing to pay for AI consumption usage of their tooling, of their department? But I think that might be interesting. I don't know what's the answer there.
Yeah, what you measure, I guess, a sort of willingness to pay, which has been interesting in the developer space, where famously developers are cheap when it comes to tooling, but with the code and cursor and this and that, everybody is shilling out money, even if it's not reimbursed by the employer, because they just see so much value in what the tools do for them. So that's an interesting thing. I still think like business should pay for the tool, but it would be an interesting thought experiment. Like, oh, if we took this tool away from you, how much would you pay to get it back? It makes your life easier. And then I'm sure a lot of people in the enterprise can think of tools where they would pay money to like not have to use that ever again.
Yes, that relates to the PMF survey question. How dissatisfied will you be if we took this tool away from you? If we took away the AI capabilities on your CRM, how unhappy will you be? Or will you actually be very glad? Like, I know that from my space, the space of agility, few people that are running agility transformations are willing, not to say actually asking the teams that they work with, the groups that they're working with, are we a keeper? Like, would you fight to keep using the process, the operating system? And will you fight to keep having access to us as a internal consulting service? If you're an internal consultant, whether that's an AI consultant or an Agile consultant, it would be very interesting to see what the people that you work with, what do they think? Are they willing to tolerate you? Are they going to fight for your time? Are they going to use the first opportunity to throw you under the bus because you're not useful? It might be a tough mirror to face, but it's better to know early on and have the transparency than be surprised when the budget for the enabling function is cut, which happens very often.
Makes sense. I understand.
So I'm curious, who are the people, when you work with an organization, who do you work with? Who's your partner inside? What kind of organizations do you work with? And who's your partner inside those organizations? What does that look like typically?
Yeah, so technically, or not technically, typically, it is like the person that would want to work with us is non-technical business owner or business function owner, head in one way or another, director of a department, or if the company isn't that big, just founder, CTO. If it's even a company with a CTO, which these days pretty much any company is also a tech company in addition to what they do. But yeah, so those will be the typical person we work with, and then they might have technical people but not trained in AI machine learning that then also work with us to basically design a product or an initiative, come up with a plan, what they actually want to do. Now we work on implementation, ongoing refinements, and rollout testing, all those parts.
And how does that initiative typically look like? Like, what people from the organization does it involve? What are
Yeah, so
what are the sort of process? Is there any
maybe one
operating system
caveat
that
is
you
that
want?
so we as labs haven't been around for all that long, so it's not like I have a huge sample size. But both from the projects we have done and the ones where we're in the pipeline talking about, what is involved is the business owner stakeholder of the entire initiative has some vision of where they think there are ways where AI should be able to help, but they're not, maybe they're not entirely sure, because again, with AI, there's some uncertainty of, it's a bit like, so Andrei Karpathy, great machine learning guy, he calls it Swiss cheese model of AI, where it's very good at something and then you slightly change the parameters, now it's really bad. Bit of a tangent, but you don't know whether it would actually do what you want it to do until you try it in some fashion. So they have this vision, and they feel like, we're doing this thing, and it's kind of like what we feel like, even ChatGPT could be good at, but we don't know. We need to figure it out. And so, that's one point where they come in. And then, of course, we need to work with the people doing the actual work that needs to get enhanced, augmented, improved, the subject matter experts. Imagine we're working with a insurance company then whoever is doing the contract review, something like that, we work with them to really understand ins and outs, data, expected behavior, so kind of the AI specific parts, but also how does this need to be deployed? Can it be on the cloud? Does it need to be mobile? Should it be a web app? What about, this cloud versus that? Yeah, all these points that any software project has to do.
And how do you run this software project?
So we're small. It's just my co-founder and I, which these days you can actually get quite a lot done if there are parts of the software engineering stack lifecycle where we have some need for additional help. We can hire contractors from our network.
So it's a project that you take and do separate than the people in the organization, or is it typically like you team up with people inside the organization
so
that have access to the internal products? How does it typically work?
So the typical way would be like we do the actual, like if it's a delivery project, then we do the actual delivery, because typically then the client organization wouldn't have the capability to deliver it themselves. Otherwise, why would they hire us? We've had a case where we did like an initial phase just us, and then for next phase the client added on extra support from a consulting company, not one of the big fours, but like somewhere in that ballpark. Probably all I can say there, but just in a way like to kind of de-risk and feel good about it. But then we were still involved as the principal software engineer and machine learning engineers to provide that guidance. So I can also see, so that was kind of like a three-way thing with the client and the consulting and then us. And I could also see that a client has a IT function, a tech team. That's just not their bread and butter. And I guess that's a typical model, right? You bring in certain experts, whether that's cybersecurity, whether that's machine learning, generative AI. So those can then be somewhat smaller scale because we can just do the hard work and guidance and point people in the right direction, and then they figure it out from there pretty much independently, or well, just with guidance.
So in your interactions with these business owners and technology people in the organizations that you work with, what would you say have been the ingredients for successful projects and the anti-patterns that kind of know where it's going when those happen? Things to be careful of.
Yeah, so we hadn't had anything kind of in terms of anti-patterns, hadn't had anything go horribly wrong at this point, but kind of both from previous work and seeing other projects tangentially involved on the sidelines, what's the anti-pattern? So what works is if kind of the objectives and values are clear, what we want to achieve, but there is freedom and leverage and flexibility in the how. And so an anti-pattern that I would see is the typical agile waterfall thing where you decide ahead of time that this is going to be a 6-month project because you want to show it to your stakeholders, to the board, to the CEO, to the industry conference, doesn't matter. And like a fixed deadline is fine. But then because you also know exactly what you want, you map that all into user stories and You say, well, 6 months divided by this and that is that many sprints because this is how many sprints we have, and that means you need to put these many stories into these sprints, and then
And you have a Gantt chart without calling it a Gantt chart.
yeah, and it's exactly that, and the whole idea of estimates. What does it matter that we estimate something? You told us this needs to happen then, so like it needs to happen then. Or velocity charts. What does it matter that we track velocity? You told us how many stories and which ones you need to be done.
Let me poke you on that for a second. So if I play, first of all, I'm with you, but if I'm the business owner here or whoever is the sponsor, I want to have some sense of where this is going. And the problem that I'm facing, if I'm playing the devil's advocate for a second, is I'm going to pay you or fund my people. It doesn't have to be an external vendor. And they're going to go away and do their things. And they're telling me, no estimates, no velocity. I'm going to give you a black box, or I'm going to look like a black box. And I'm going to do, I'm going to do sprints, I'm going to do Kanban, whatever. But you won't really know until you know. That's like what I'm hearing. I was just having a conversation yesterday with the CTO, whose CEO is struggling with the lack of delivery ownership, delivery culture for their R&D organization, but the same could happen here in this sort of project. And I think, or what I've seen, it's not just what I think, my experience is that there are ways to give this transparency that doesn't create that Gantt chart. It's not about the Gantt chart, it's about what is it that we know? We know we need to achieve a certain outcome. What does that outcome really look like? What are the hard points and soft points? Of the hard points, the use cases that we want to show, how many of those use cases are working already at each point in time? How do we think those use cases will spread over the 6 months that we're going to work on this, the 2 months that we're going to work on this, whatever, measuring or providing some sort of indication, how are we doing? Is this tracking in the right direction or not?
Yeah.
Is useful. I've seen it being useful against scope creep. Like when you don't have anything like this, it's tempting for people to add more and more use cases, to say, oh, this is cool. While we're at this, let's add this capability and that capability, because we don't know anyhow when this is going to finish. So let's just keep delivering value. But there are diminishing returns.
Yeah.
Do we know, is it still valuable? Is it more valuable to deliver the base outcome after 2 months, or to deliver with these additional use cases after 3 months? If we're not even having those conversations, we're just letting, the team figure it out, which might be okay if they have the right context, if they know all of the parameters, what are we trying to do? If we gave them an outcome function of you can invest as much as you'd like, as long as each week that you work on this delivers this reduction in effort or whatever. If we don't do that, then they might be making decisions the wrong way. They might not be really optimizing for the North Star. So it's a nuanced, I think it's one of those nuanced things where you want some way to measure. Velocity is not the best one. If you have to stick to velocity, okay, fine. What I'm trying to do more and more with people is use outcome-based leading indicators. No, we won't have a Gantt chart. We can track velocity, whatever. We can do throughput, whatever's the easiest. But more interesting, we will show you over time that output function the key result that you want to achieve, we will show you evidence along the way. How far are we along in getting there? That's the best way to structure, projects, to structure products, but it's not trivial to structure them so that you can actually show progress on the real leading indicator every couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think to build that trust and that transparency that you talk about, I think the stakeholder would be way more impressed by a demo that shows this does what we want it to do.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, last time we showed you it couldn't do this, now it can do that. That's way more interesting than just giving them a report that says last week we completed 37 story points. Okay.
Yeah, I try to talk about the difference between velocity and traction. Velocity is output, is activity. It's output. It's not activity. Activity is we spent X hours on this. Velocity is output. Traction is this is moving the needle towards where we want to be. We're not just showing you working stuff. It's also working stuff that does what you want it to do.
Yes.
At least a small part of it.
Yeah, and that of course then requires that the team is empowered enough to say like, hey, this use case you added or this user story you threw in there, are we sure it is going to lead to the outcome you want, or is it tangential?
And that's where the differentiation you made, I think you nailed it with the best practice of tell us what you need, tell us what you want, what you really, really want, and we will figure out how. You don't have to tell us the user stories. The team that is going to work on this is going to slice it into the work that they need to do. Tell us what's the big story of what you're trying to achieve. What's the outcome?
Yeah, and it's interesting that because recently there was this, I guess, development or pushback against even using user stories. I think the linear, that issue tracker software, they have their whole philosophy build system written up online, and their point is, write issues, don't write stories, because you can read the piece and see if you agree with it or not. But maybe that's a backlash against how they have just become a bit bastardized. And so another recent read was, it's not that recent as a book, but I just recently read it, was Robert Martin's Clean Agile, where he again says user stories are supposed to be like very simple, just as a bit of a placeholder for conversation that needs to take place just in time when you actually work on the thing. But they have become this thing where they're in Jira and they're like 3 pages long, and there's 15 different acceptance criteria, and it's all already spec'd out by the product owner.
And they're ready months in advance.
Many months in advance, and which creates a lot of waste, because by the time you get there, half of the ACs might not be applicable anymore anyway. But so then that's all spec'd out, and then the designer already made the design for like the fully functional thing in Figma, and so now you have this super complicated, lots of tabs, dashboards, pop-ups, whatever. And now good luck doing nice modular vertical slicing on something like that. So then you say, my estimate for that is, I don't know, 8 points. What comes after 8? 13 points. Because it's just everything is meshed together into a giant story. And then because of that, you have your feature branch working on that story that lives for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Everything gets so
much there's a lot to fix.
A lot to fix
in this ecosystem. Yes.
Yes.
But I guess, and maybe that's maybe a good place to kind of converge. I guess what I'm hearing from you, and maybe that's just because that's my experience and what I want to hear, so you let me know, but what I'm hearing from you is these sort of projects, they're the classic place to be agile in how you develop them, to think from a product perspective, think about an internal market, try things, see what works, focus on the outcomes, let the details emerge along the way. Yet, it's another place where the Agile theater is either making things hard for people that are trying to use it, or has left such a distaste for from using it in IT that people are not using it for these projects, and
Yeah,
are losing on the benefits of the discipline of the
yes.
right level of agility.
And I'm with you on that, and a lot of it comes down to, and I was thought you were going to make a punchy quote of to say these projects, they're the place to be agile, but they're not the place to do agile.
I don't think there's any place to do Agile, to be honest.
Exactly.
It depends on what you mean by do
Yeah,
Agile, but
that's yeah. In this case in particular, the principles very strongly still apply. The principles of agile. And but if you take those principles and you apply them to a given context and use that to derive practices, those practices might make sense in that context. So you say, great, this is how we should do it. And then you port those to a different context. It doesn't work anymore. And you have to go back to the principles. So an example that comes to mind here is that for standard software development, test-driven development is awesome. Small unit tests, green refactor, really great. I wouldn't do it any other way. If you're working on an AI system, how do you even write a unit test? That says like, oh, if I ask ChatGPT to do this, or like the GPT AI API, do this, it will do that. Like, it doesn't work. But the principle of working in small steps, making sure those work, and then integrating that into the behavior you want, totally still applies. You just need to do it in a different way. And similarly with a lot of the agile theater, it all came out of context where it makes sense, estimate this and story point that and all these things, because the principle is business owners want to know where things are going. We want to know if we're on track. All true. It just helps to just go back to those principles and apply them in that context instead of just buying the off-the-shelf way of doing things, how it has been codified. And maybe that's also a bit the criticism level at Scrum and Agile coaching is you're supposed to discover better ways of working, but actually the best way of working was discovered 20 years ago, and it's written in the Scrum guide. That's a bit of
Listen, Clemens, I think you just earned your badge for being a friend of the podcast, a friend of the No BS Nuanced Scaling with Agility podcast. That's exactly what we believe in here. I think that's a great place to pause. If people want to look you up, to see what you're up to, get more of your insights on how to do those AI projects right, where do they find you?
So the website is ACE, AICE, labs.com. On there's articles, there's the daily newsletter, themes along
which is
those
great.
lines.
I'm reading it and loving it every day.
Thank you so much. Yeah, likewise. And that's about it. And then there you'll find my email too if you want to ask more questions.
I'll provide all of those details. We'll provide all of those details in the show notes. If you are interested in my emails, I launched a new crash course to scaling with agility, an email crash course for scaling with agility with some of the best insights from the space, trying to think about principles, focus on outcomes, a lot of the good stuff that we talked about here, and how to apply it not just to product development, but to other frontiers like AI. Thank you. Thank you, Clemens, for being here. Thank you, listener. Conversation about how to do AI projects right. What does that look like? How does that relate to agility? For For Clemens, I'm Yuval. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Scaling with Agility podcast. See you the next time.